Right. Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something today that's, well, it's got a lot of people talking here in Nigeria.
It certainly does.
The government's going to get this N 1.77 trillion.
Yeah.
And in the National Assembly, they already improved it, really fast.
Yeah, that was quick.
So, a lot of people are struggling right now, right? Can you blame folks for wondering, is this really the best move? Especially with all the different opinions flying around about it.
Exactly.
You've got, big names like former VP Atiku Abubakar saying it's a bad idea. The Lagos Chamber of Commerce, they're not too happy about it either. And then on the other side, you've got some civil society organizations actually supporting the loan.
Yeah, it's quite a mix.
It is. So let's get into the nitty gritty here, because this is where it gets kind of wild. Nigeria, we're already the third biggest borrower from the World Bank's International Development Association, right?
That's right.
And Atiku's pointing out that this whole loan, it's based on the Naira being way stronger than it is in reality.
That's a critical point, because that really changes how much we actually end up owing in the end. But beyond that, even, there's the whole debt to GDP thing. You know how much we owe compared to how big our economy is.
Right.
And in Nigeria, that ratio, it's already over 50%. So that's a bit of a warning sign. We got to be careful about falling into a debt trap.
Okay, so let's break down what Atiku's saying here. He's not mincing words, is he? Calls the whole thing irresponsible. And he's really worried about corruption. Is the government even being honest about how much money they're actually bringing in?
It's interesting, because what Atiku's saying, it kind of ties into this bigger question about how we're running our economy, right? When a country borrows too much, all sorts of things can happen. It can lead to inflation. People's money doesn't go as far. We might see less investment in things like healthcare, schools, and then you've got future generations. They're going to be stuck paying this back.
Yeah, makes you think. And to really make his point, Atiku, he compares this whole thing to when we got debt relief back under Obasanjo.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Makes you wonder, have we really come that far in managing our money since then? I don't know, something to think about.
Absolutely.
Now, let's hear from the Lagos Chamber of Commerce, the LCCI, right? They're basically saying, hey, our economy is already pretty shaky, and they're worried about all this debt repayment eating up the budget. Plus, with the Naira getting weaker, paying everything back is going to be even harder.
Yeah, and the LCCI's voice, it carries a lot of weight here. They represent businesses, which are a huge part of making any economy work, right? So when they're worried about stuff like investment and jobs, well, that affects everyone's ability to just, put food on the table.
For sure. And one thing they suggested, I thought this was pretty interesting, was expanding our non-oil revenue. Finding other ways to make money besides just relying on oil. I think a lot of people would like to see that happen. But here's the thing, and this is where it gets kind of unexpected. Some of the civil society organizations, the CSOs, they're actually on board with this loan. Their thinking is it'll help boost important industries, and they say Nigeria has a pretty good track record of paying back its debts.
Right. And it brings up this whole question of the budget and how the government plans its finances, right?
Yeah.
The CSOs are focusing on this projected deficit they have for the 2025 budget. Basically, they're going to spend more than they bring in. It's called a fiscal deficit. And a lot of times that's why countries borrow money.
Okay. So we've got these different sides, Atiku and the LCCI with their worries, and then the CSOs sounding a little more optimistic. I'm curious, what sticks out to you so far? Do you think the CSOs have a stronger argument, or do the concerns from Atiku and the LCCI outweigh that?
That's a tough one.
It is a tough one. But think about it, right? Because this debate, this isn't just numbers on paper. It's about real people's lives in Nigeria.
Right.
The debt, how we manage the economy, and then, the elephant in the room, corruption. Those all have consequences for folks. Jobs, how much things cost, healthcare, education, it all ties in. So it's important to think about what kind of Nigeria do we want, not just for us, but for the generations coming after us. And what role does being responsible with money, with our finances, play in getting there?
Yeah, those are some big questions.
Yeah, they are. But they're the questions we got to be asking ourselves.
I agree. It really makes you think about, what kind of future we're building. What are the choices we're making today going to mean for Nigeria tomorrow?
And speaking of choices, let's get back to this loan for a sec. Remember how quickly the National Assembly signed off on it? I mean, it's got to raise some flags.
Yeah. I mean, you got to wonder how much they really looked into it. You know, a decision this big, this much money. Did they have time to really debate it, think about the risks?
That's a good question. And then there's how they're actually getting this loan. It's through these things called Eurobonds on the international capital market. And according to the Senate Committee on Local and Foreign Debts, it's all supposed to go towards finishing up projects that are already underway, capital projects.
So what are they spending it on then? That's what matters, right? Is it stuff that's actually going to help people improve things in Nigeria? Or is it more like those, what do they call them, those white elephant projects? All show, no substance.
Right. Right. And Atiku, he brought up something else that's kind of fishy. The exchange rate for this loan, it's set at $1 to $800. But the central bank rate, it's over N$1,600 to $1 right now. That's a huge difference.
Wow, yeah, that's a big problem. Basically, we're going to end up owing way more in Naira than they're letting on. Makes you wonder, are they being straight with us about the numbers? Are we getting the whole story?
And Atiku didn't stop there. He basically accused the government of hiding the truth about how much money they're bringing in. Like President Tinubu, he was bragging about record tax and customs collections earlier this year. So why do we need to borrow this much if we're supposedly rolling in dough?
Yeah, that doesn't add up, does it? The government needs to explain that one. If they're making so much money, where's it all going? Why do we need to borrow even more?
Atiku even called the National Assembly an accomplice to this whole borrowing thing. Pretty strong words.
It is. It makes you think about how our government works, you know? Are there enough checks and balances? Is the National Assembly really doing its job, holding the executive branch accountable?
And then Atiku, he went straight for the jugular. He brought up corruption. He flat out said, this whole thing, this need to borrow all this money, is because of corruption. Not because we need infrastructure or anything.
Oof. Yeah, that's a serious accusation. And unfortunately, it's not like we haven't seen this before, right? The idea that money borrowed for good causes, for helping people, it ends up lining the pockets of a few instead.
And what makes Atiku's point even stronger is that he compares it to when we got debt relief under Obasanjo. You know, a lot of people remember that as a good time for Nigeria. Things were looking up.
It's true. It kind of feels like we're going in circles, doesn't it? We've been down this road before. You got to learn from the past so you don't repeat the same mistakes.
Atiku, he's basically saying, hey, slow down. Think this through. This mountain of loans, it's going to crush people.
And a lot of people are already struggling, right? Prices going up, no jobs, not enough good schools or hospitals. This loan, it's scary, could make things even worse.
It really makes you think, all these decisions being made, they're not just numbers, you know. It's people's lives, real families, real communities, all across Nigeria.
Exactly. And it brings us back to those big questions, right? Is this loan really for the people? Will it actually help anyone? Or is it just going to make us more indebted and maybe even make corruption worse?
Big questions, tough questions. And they deserve some serious discussion. We got to look at the information,
Yes.
think for ourselves, and hold our leaders accountable for what they're doing.
I couldn't agree more.
And it's like, what about the kids? You know, the next generation. Atiku and the LCCI, they both brought that up. This loan, it could really mess things up for them down the line.
Yeah, they've got a point. We can't just brush that aside. If we keep borrowing and borrowing like it's going out of style, we're going to leave them with a huge bill. And that's not fair. It limits their chances to build a good life, a better Nigeria.
It's like, we're supposed to be taking care of things, right? Not just thinking about ourselves today, but making sure things are good for the people coming after us.
Exactly. It's about making sure everyone has a fair shot. You know, making sure future generations can have good lives too. That's what we call intergenerational equity.
Okay, so we're wrapping up this deep dive, and we want to leave you with something to really think about. Given, you know, everything we know about Nigeria, the debt, the corruption, what would you do to make sure this borrowed money actually gets used right?
Yeah, think about it. What could we do to make sure someone's keeping an eye on things? To make sure no one's pocketing the money? And what can regular people, like you listening, what can we do to make sure the government is spending our money the right way?
These are the questions we need to be asking. And we hope you keep thinking about them, keep learning about this stuff, because informed citizens, that's how we make Nigeria better. That's how we hold our leaders accountable. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you learned something and that it got you thinking. Remember, the more you know, the more power you have. And in a democracy, we the people, we have the power.
Keep asking those tough questions, stay involved, and let's work together to make Nigeria a better place. For everyone.